And he broke American drug laws, but should Canada hand him over to the United States? Will the self-proclaimed Prince of Pot, Marc Emery, awaits his fate? 3 MPs come to his defense. Why are Liberal Ujjal Dosanjh and Libby Davies from the NDP backing Emery? We'll hear from them in a moment, and Marc Emery too. Plus, should teens who commit serious crimes get serious time? The Justice Minister unveiled the Conservative government's latest bill to get tough on crime. But we've got some other questions for him too about Afghan detainees, Raheem Jaffer, and why not Marc Emery as well. Rob Nicholson is here too. This is Power and Politics. Welcome back. Marijuana activist Marc Emery's battle to avoid going to a U.S. prison got a boost this week in the House of Commons. 3 MPs presented a petition signed by thousands of individual Canadians asking Justice Minister Rob Nicholson not to sign Emery's extradition papers. Emery was convicted by a U.S. court to a 5-year sentence for selling marijuana seeds online in 2005, and he joins me now from Vancouver. Hi, Marc Emery. How are you?
I'm feeling very good today.
Yeah. So listen, I bet you are. You've got 3 MPs behind you. You've got a petition of thousands of Canadians who say that you shouldn't be extradited. What do you make of all this?
Well, it's important for them to reiterate that these were all things done in a political context. I've run for election since 1980 12 times. None of what I'm accused of doing, which is selling seeds, cannabis seeds over the internet, harmed anyone. There are no complaints from any individuals about my behavior. And there are levels of support in this country, including the 3 previous mayors of Vancouver, senators in the Senate, and certainly gracious members of the House of Commons who presented that petition yesterday, have been somewhat supportive of some aspects of my, and that I'm being dealt with unfairly and harshly and being extradited to the United States for a very minor offense that particularly wouldn't net anyone over a couple $100 fine here in Canada.
But isn't it time at some point to face the music for what you've done? Because it is illegal. I mean, that's the reality of it.
Well, I'm willing to do that. I believe that going to jail will actually further our movement and that people will become resentful. I think millions of Canadians are sympathetic to the work I've done and appreciate the work I've done and are opposed to this surrender of sovereignty by turning me over to the United States. I think it's outsourcing our justice system. I mean, there are charges that could have been laid against me here in Canada for activity I did in Canada, including exporting cannabis seeds. That's a potential charge they could lay. But I think the Crown and the Government of Canada was frustrated in that I was not being suppressed by the law and by the courts as they are, and so they wanted me sent away. They outsourced our justice system to the United States.
One of the people that supported you yesterday inside the House of Commons was Conservative MP Scott Reid. He's not available on our panel today, but were you surprised with that, given that the Conservatives say that they're tough on crime?
Well, Mr. Reid, you know, I'm sure he needed some courage to get up and sort of indirectly oppose the Conservative Justice Minister's intent to extradite me, that it's thought to be his intent to extradite me, and I thought he was brave to do so. I thought all 3 members of Parliament, Mr. Dosanjh, Ms. Davies, and Mr. Reid, were very eloquent. They articulated that Health Canada recommended people come to me who had medical marijuana permits to get their seeds. They reiterated that Mr. Reid pointed out there's only a $200 fine. It's the only review court precedent for anyone selling seeds in Canada. And Mr. Dosanjh pointed out that he thought the process was being unfair, and as a former Attorney General and Premier, as he pointed out, I thought that carried a lot of weight in his presentation. And Ms. Davies did such a heartfelt job of representing me that I'm really grateful to all 3 of them, and I'm hoping Canadians are grateful to them for representing me as well.
So the Justice Minister, you've been told that he has the extradition paper on his desk. He tells me he hasn't seen it yet. Where does this stand in terms of you being extradited?
Well, my lawyer says I've been eligible for extradition since January 8th, when my lawyer says he does have it on his desk. I only hope Mr. Nicholson is correct and that somehow he's misplaced it and that he's not going to find it in any foreseeable future. But sooner or later, he'll have to make a decision whether to send me to the United States or not to send me to the United States. And I think he would be very popular and earn the respect and accolades of millions of Canadians if he rejected the offer to extradite me and in fact kept me here in Canada, where he also has the option of charging me with the identical same charges that I'm facing in the United States. He could charge me with that here. That would negate the extradition and it would satisfy any concerns about whether I'm going to be dealt with fairly in front of a Canadian court.
And you would be okay with that?
Oh, of course, yes. I'm quite willing to face the music here in Canada. The idea that someone who's been in Vancouver for 15 years, I've never been to the United States, I didn't do any of these actions in the United States, these were all consenting adults, nobody's complaining about my behavior. It's only the hurt pride of the U.S. government that's really at stake here, and that's what we're debating. It's a Bush holdover, really, that's carried on now into the next administration in the United States.
So if the Justice Minister goes ahead and signs the extradition order, are you willing to go along with it, or what's the next step for you?
Well, I'll face the consequences of that, but I definitely think that there'll be a backlash to that, that millions of Canadians who respect Canadian sovereignty or also respect my activities as a Canadian for 30 years, engaging in politics peacefully and honestly, they'll be very upset. And I look forward to that backlash if the minister decides to extradite me. I'm hoping he'll take the counsel of Honourable Members Reid and Davies and Dosanjh and decide the opposite, and to keep me here in Canada, and I think appeal to the greater nature of Canadians to protect their own from unjust punishment abroad.
Can I, just one last question. What would be the punishment here in Canada versus in the U.S.? Do you have an idea of that if you were charged here in Canada versus the U.S.?
The reason Mr. Reid brought up the $200 fine as being typical for seed selling is that's the only review court decision in Canada for someone who was selling seeds. And it's a Court of Appeal decision out of British Columbia that did in fact verify that $200 fine was suitable for someone who had several kilograms of these seeds, was advertising them in High Times magazine, doing all the things that I am alleged to have done. He was doing them and got a $200 fine, and the BC Court of Appeal verified that as being a legitimate punishment. So the contrast between me originally facing life imprisonment and now 5 years imprisonment in a U.S. federal penitentiary versus $200 fine are very extreme.
Okay, Marc Emery, we'll check back with you and see if see what happens. Thanks very much for your time.
I hope I'm here to answer.
Thanks, Marc.